Now, friends, loyalty is a funny word, right? It means all sorts of things to all sorts of different people. Found a picture that defines the word loyalty, and there are so many words in that picture. They're hard to read, right? Get smaller and smaller. You see so many different synonyms. If you're willing, can you shout out something that comes to your mind when you think of the word loyalty? Love, great. Sacrifice, great. Time, yep. Connection, yep. Yeah, I mean, these are all sorts of things. I mean, you can even say that all the words that show up on the back right here. I think one of the common things when it comes to loyalty is you think of customer loyalty. Why do you return to a store or a restaurant? You trust in the person, yeah. You like the food, great. You got to find a reason to keep returning. You see, the two words that I think define loyalty as a whole, because you can come up with many different things that describe it, but consistency and perseverance tie into this. Consistency in the sense that if you are to trust somebody, you would want to trust them for the same reason or for a growing reason each time, right? Perseverance in the sense that if you reach a crisis point, you want that person or that place to remain the same or to fulfill the promises that they said they would in the first place. In the Bible, there is a word that pops up close to 300 sometimes. Often it's described of God's covenantal love or his loyal love. It's the word hesed. Say hesed with me. We're going to learn some Hebrew today. Hesed. Put some ha in it. Hesed. Hesed is an interesting word because there is no English equivalent of the word. Often there are roughly 5 different or 6 different ways to describe it: kindness, faithfulness, mercy, goodness, loyalty, and steadfast love. But to combine all of that into one word and to mean all of that at the same time is a complicated idea. Commentator says this: normally hesed describes something that happens within an existing relationship, whether between 2 human beings or between God and man. In human relationships, hesed implies loving our neighbor not merely in terms of warm emotional feelings, but in acts of love and service that we owe to the other person simply because he is part of the covenant community. God's people are to do justly, to love hesed, and to walk humbly with their God, as is said in Micah 6:8. There's a couple different ways that we see the idea of hesed today. What it tries to strike is this idea, again, of this covenantal relationship, this binding relationship between somebody. I don't think often when you make a friend, you say, all right, guys, I'm going to write up a contract, and, you're going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and we're going to be best friends, right? Is that how you start a friendship? Anybody do that? Be crazy. I think I'd get all kinds of weird looks in high school if I did that. I'd walk around with a clipboard and say, all right, sign here, you're my best friend now. You don't do that often in marriage or baptism or the idea of church membership either. I don't think you're typically walking around with a clipboard, but the heart of the idea of a covenant is stricken. You see, with marriage, it's a really interesting idea. When we think of marriage, you just think, oh man, I love you so much, let's get married and just spend the rest of our life together, right? The idea of biblical marriage is this: when you give your vows, you are giving it before God, saying, this is my final authority. We understand that we're not perfect. Part of the vows is often in sickness and in health, right? You hear that phrase in a marriage vow? That literally means when you are in times of trouble, when you are in times of difficulty, you remain together. When you don't have the strength, you're appealing to God. Before each other, you're giving these vows, and before all of those who have gathered as loved ones, you are appealing to all parties and saying, this is what is binding us. In baptism, you're not just dunking in water and saying, oh, now everything's better. You are appealing before God saying, I am a new person. I am giving you my life. And before all of the witnesses, you are keeping me accountable before God. In this Christian walk, I'm walking with you. It's a kind of covenant in church membership. It's this idea that you are appealing before God, saying, as I am part of your community in your church, I give this life, I give this Christian walk to you. And as I walk with this church, we are walking before you. There's all kinds of different covenants that come within the Christian walk. You even think in a job, right? What is the first thing you do when you accept a position? Any ideas? Just think for a moment. When you accept a position, oh, sure, how much you get paid. You want to know how much, you agree to the payment. How many hours? Yep. Here's the thing. You're often signing a piece of paper agreeing that I'm going to work this long, I'm going to accept this much money, and then you're signing all the tax documents, and all of this is legally binding you in a way where you are representing the company, you are representing the boss that you have, and you are continuing to go forward and hopefully continuing to grow. But that binding contract, even if you're not focused on that, that is the starting place, and that is where you grow from. Hesed is a really interesting word again. As we have said, there's no English equivalent with it. But the closest that we can get is to this idea of loyalty. And we're going to see this pretty heavily impressed in the story in 1 Samuel 20. Our sermon series has been King of My Heart, where you must actively choose to have God be king of your heart. All sorts of things are going to try to take first place. All sorts of things are going to try to fight for first place. You have all sorts of anxieties and depressions and fears and worries and things that pop up that take priority. But the thing that we see inside of Scripture is that God, when He is in first place, your life is filled with purpose and direction. So the title for today is Loyalty When Rubber Meets the Road. When loyalty gets really tough. The big idea ultimately is that loyalty is the mark of lasting love. To give you a little bit of context, what has happened up to this point in the past couple chapters, David in 1 Samuel 16 is anointed king after Saul has gone his own way. This would be the second king that has been anointed inside of Israel's history. And he's kind of put on a state of pause. He's still a boy. He's still trying to figure things out. He's sent back to the shepherding fields, and he's fighting lions and bears, as is said inside of Scripture. I have never seen or heard of anybody grabbing a lion's beard, as is said, and that sounds mind-boggling. But he's put through all kinds of trials as a shepherd, and then he's invited into the king's presence to be essentially a music therapist. And he takes care of the king as a servant, as an armor bearer, and he continues to serve the king. He does not take the role of a king immediately. He is cultivated. David eventually goes out to battle against Goliath, this massive figure. He wins many battles against the Philistines. He earns the favor of people, and he's also moving into the ire of Saul. As he becomes more successful, he does not let the success get to his head, but he sees his success as an opportunity to bless the people around him. But because he is successful, the current king sees him as a threat. David is set up to take the throne. He has all of the qualifications, but he submits to Saul's authority and to God's timing. And Saul continuously seeks to kill David 4 times in a public sense, throwing spears at him. And man, I think he's got a bad shot. He's missed 3 times. At close proximity. I don't know what's up with that. But even to the point of his own humiliation, Saul does not get the point that his time is done. He continues to seek David to the end of his life. And this is where we pick up. At the end of 1 Samuel 19, David has fled. He's gone to be with Samuel for a time, the prophet who initially anointed him, and Saul has chased after him, he's humiliated, and he's kind of left in a state of, what do we do next? David flees. Said of verse 1 in chapter 20, it says this, David now fled from Naioth in Ramah and found Jonathan, saying, what have I done? What is my crime? How have I offended your father that he is so determined to kill me? Jonathan protests. He says, that's not true. You're not going to die. He always tells me everything he's going to do, not even the littlest of things. I know my father wouldn't hide something like this from me. It just isn't so. Then David took an oath before Jonathan and said, your father knows perfectly well about our friendship. So he has said to himself, I won't tell you that I won't tell Jonathan. Why should I hurt him? But I swear to you that I am only one step away from death. I swear it by the Lord and by your own soul. And Jonathan says, tell me what I can do to help you. Jonathan is kind of, we'll start with David real quick. David is kind of an interesting figure here. He flees, and you would think, he would get as far away as possible. When you have somebody who is clearly out to get you, you're not going to stay in close proximity to that person. Especially when they try to attack you and go after your life multiple times. If anything, you get more locks for your door. Or you flee town and you move, right? He doesn't. He goes back and he goes to the son of the king and it says, what have I done? What is my crime? How have I offended your father? And Jonathan is interesting as well. He's seen his father specifically say, I'm going to assassinate David. And Jonathan proves to be this very trusting figure. He convinces his father in the previous chapter, back down. David has done great things. You need to see that there's a better way to look at this. David is your benefactor. Jonathan chooses to be exceedingly trusting. He thinks that his father has turned a new leaf and that everything's fine. There's no issues. Of course, my father would tell me all of these things. Jonathan's trust is astounding. So much so that David has to wake up Jonathan with an oath. And there's this common use of oath in swearing by the Lord that's used throughout the chapter. The amount of times that each of these boys take an oath is incredible. I don't think it's necessarily a model that we should follow. In Matthew 5:33-37, it says, you have heard that our ancestors were told, you must not break your vows. You must carry out your vows to make to the Lord, that you make to the Lord. But I say, do not make any vows. Do not say by heaven, because heaven is God's throne. And do not say by the earth, because the earth is his footstool. And do not say by Jerusalem, for Jerusalem is the city of the great king. Do not even say by my head, for you cannot turn one hair white or black. Just say a simple yes, I will, or no, I won't. Anything beyond this is from the evil one. Because here's the thing, when you make a covenant in the sense of, I'm going to do this, I swear I'm going to do this, is it easy to keep? Promises are very interesting. That's why we come up with all these tactics like, pinky promises or cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. I don't know if you've heard that as a kid. It's a rhyme that was made back in the early 1900s, and, it's still with us today. I remember hearing that all the time as a kid, and we'd come up with witty rhymes for it just to say, I promise that I'm going to do this. I swear that I'm going to do this. We're people that are so easy to break our own promises. But here David is. He takes an oath. But the thing about his oath is that he's giving it to the Lord first. And that means that he is acknowledging that he has to keep it. He is dead serious about what he is saying. He says, I swear to you that I am only one step away from death. This is serious, Jonathan. This needs to be addressed ASAP. I swear by the Lord and by your own soul. And Jonathan wakes up. He sees something needs to be addressed now. David replied, tomorrow we will celebrate the new moon festival. It's already interesting too. Saul has been trying to kill David. He sent guards after him to try to capture him and kill him. In the middle of his sleep at that too, when he was presumed sick. But he's still expected to be at the feast. At an intimate feast. That's mind-boggling. But, he's expected to be at this feast tomorrow. And he says, I've always eaten with the king on this occasion. But tomorrow I'll hide in the field and stay there until the evening of the third day. If your father asks where I am, tell him I asked permission to go home to Bethlehem to the annual family sacrifice. If he says, fine, you will know that all is well. But if he is angry and loses his temper, you will know that he is determined to kill me. Show me this loyalty. This is where the first hesed comes into play. Show me this covenant love, this loyal love, as you have sworn, as my sworn friend. For we made a solemn pact before the Lord. Or kill me yourself if I have sinned against your father. But please don't betray me to him. Jonathan says, never. You know that if I had the slightest notion my father was planning to kill you, I would tell you at once. David comes up with two different plans. Option one, we got a soft lie that we're going to share with Saul, and we're going to say that, David is absent. He's not going to be present at the feast. He's going to be out in the field hiding by a rock. And when it's asked, where is David? We're going to see what the reaction is, and then we're going to test the waters and see if it's actually safe. Or option two, if I've actually sinned, if Jonathan, you accept that I have done something wrong, you take responsibility, since we have this covenant relationship already built, since we have sworn before the Lord as friends. This is, again, a unique relationship that Jonathan and David have. They have built this covenant saying, I give you all that I am. I love you as I am. And we're going to walk together before the Lord knowing that this friendship is blessed. He's saying that if I've actually done anything wrong, you take responsibility and kill me. It's a bewildering scene. But David is trying to get to the heart of saying, this is not a sustainable way to live, to have a king constantly after my life. We need to fix this now. Either I need to be on the run, I need to take accountability, or we need to address the king. Jonathan says, never. I'm not going to kill you. And if I knew that something was going to endanger your life, I would tell you at once. Hesed is stressed here, namely that David is imploring Jonathan to remember the covenant during this particularly stressed time. There's tremendous risk, honestly. If David is right in that Saul is going after his life, that means he's going to be a fugitive for the rest of his life, or until Saul is done and gone. He's asking Jonathan to honor this friendship. But again, if he's right, he loses a friend. Jonathan will be alienated from his father, and he has to acknowledge the future danger where David will take the throne. There's a lot at risk for both boys. But this idea of Hesed, when you acknowledge that you have given a part of yourself, when you're acknowledging that this is some kind of sacrificial love, when you are loving as you love yourself, it's willing to take that risk, that level of loyalty when it's tested. The mark of that loyalty is a lasting love. Going on in verse 10. Then David asked, how will I know whether or not your father is angry? Jonathan says, come out to the field with me. And they went out there together. Then Jonathan told David, I promise by the Lord, the God of Israel, that by this time tomorrow or the next day at the latest, I will talk with my father and let you know at once how he feels about you. If he speaks favorably about you, I will let you know. But if he is angry and wants you killed, may the Lord strike me and even kill me if I don't warn you so that you can escape and live. May the Lord be with you as he used to be with my father. And may you treat me with the faithful love of the Lord as long as I live. But if I die, treat my family with this faithful love, even when the Lord destroys all your enemies from the face of the earth. This ask from Jonathan, this plan that Jonathan builds, again, is part of the reciprocal promise. David is asking for a faithful friend. David is asking to acknowledge, he's asking Jonathan to help him in this dire time. And Jonathan says, I have this plan. We're going to go to this field, and we're going to have this way where we're going to communicate with each other what the right next step is. And he honors even that second part of the cross my heart, hope to die part. He's appealing before God, but he's saying, if I don't acknowledge this promise, if I break this promise, may God strike me dead. He's acknowledging the severity of the situation because of how much he loves his friend. But he's also acknowledging that if there is danger, if there is struggle to come, the most striking verse at the end of verse 13, may the Lord be with you. Part 1 is, may the Lord be with you as he used to be with my father. He is giving a blessing to David, saying that, my father used to be something great when he trusted in the Lord. May that same blessing go with you. Then likewise, he goes on to say that if he is to leave, that it is the Lord's will that he should go. That God is giving him a new season to come. Even though it is painful, it is a cultivating season. Even if we can't see all of what happens next. Jonathan is also asking as part of the reciprocal promise, saying that if David takes the throne, that he and his family will remain safe and that there will be a faithful love that is continued to be stressed. Because during this time, if royalty changes places, it's not just a quick succession of power. It's not like, there's a new Republican or a new Democrat or what have you. All of the king's family would be wiped out. It'd be a total purge. That would be the tradition within the cultures during that time. Jonathan is saying, if you come into power, remember me. We have this covenantal relationship. I have helped you. I've been a friend to you. Help me in the future and preserve my family. Verse 16 says, so Jonathan made a solemn pact with David, saying, may the Lord destroy all your enemies, which would include all of Saul's house as well. And Jonathan made David reaffirm his vow of friendship again, for Jonathan loved David as he loved himself. Then Jonathan said, tomorrow we celebrate the new moon festival. You will be missed when your place at the table is empty. The day after tomorrow, toward evening, go to the place where you hid before and wait there by the stone pile. I will come out and shoot 3 arrows to the side of the stone pile, as though I were shooting at a target. Then I will send a boy to bring the arrows back. If you hear me tell him they're on this side, then you will know, as surely as the Lord lives, that all is well and that there is no trouble. But if I tell him, go farther, the arrows are still ahead of you, then it will mean that you are to leave immediately, for the Lord is sending you away. And may the Lord make us keep our promises to each other, for he has witnessed them. Again, this key idea is that the Lord is the one moving in this. It's hard to see how the Lord would be moving in a difficult situation. How he would be moving inside of a king that is after his life. But Jonathan is acknowledging that the Lord is sending David away. He's sending him to be cultivated in a space of trial, to be the right kind of king. So the key idea is, the Lord is sending David away. Why? You think of your life. When you go through trials, we can trust that the Lord has a plan for us. It's hard to imagine from 0 to 3 months up to 4 to 11 months that there's a specific plan. I'm not really thinking much. I'm sure you weren't thinking much between months 1 through 11, are you? Except a goo goo gaga or, what have you. But I think, when you go through these formative years, you might question yourself, what's it going to be like to become an adult? To pretend to be an adult from 3 years old up to, let's say, 9. I think of when I hit 9 years old, my parents got divorced. I thought, what's going to happen next? This is miserable. My parents fought for years and years and years, all the way up to when I was 18, leaving high school. Mine gets torn. You think of your own life when you're in those, again, formative teenage years, wondering what's going to happen next. How am I going to get from teenage years to adult years? What's going to take me from here to there? How am I uniquely designed? What's going to be my purpose when I become an adult? When I hit 18 years old and I'm trying to figure out college and I'm trying to figure out jobs, how am I going to do it? Am I going to find the right person to share my life with? Am I going to find the right job? Am I going to have the right house? And you keep going. You try to figure out this pattern of life, and sometimes we get stuck and locked into this mentality that once I figure out the pattern, everything is done. We protect the pattern. We protect the process. But the thing is, when you trust God, that process kind of goes out the window. For me, when I was trusting in this process for so long, when I got into the beginning of college, I hated school. I hated studying. I hated anything regarding those next steps. I wanted to be a writer. I just wanted to go longboard. I wanted to go adventure. I wanted to see the world. If I had a dream job, I would be an adventurer or a treasure finder or whatever. It's that whimsical kind of thought where you don't think, how do you do it, though? Where does that infinite money line come from so that you can keep doing it? And here's the thing. I kept thinking, this is what I want to do. I want to do the things that I want to do. But when I started trusting in God, when I had people enter into my life, mentors in my life who challenged me and showed me that my purpose was incomplete, going from that 18 years old up to where I am today has been unique because God has wired me with a particular purpose. And even though I hated school, I found that I loved studying the Bible. Even though I struggled with developing friendships during a particular point in my life, God wired me in a way, put me in management positions, and put me in children's ministry where I learned to love kids and love people and invest in people's stories. I didn't see how that would work. None of that made sense when I was younger. But I continued to be humbled in a way where when I trusted God, when I trusted in the unique path He had given me, He continued to show me a unique way to live. And for each one of you, God has brought you to this unique point in your life. How He's going to move, it's hard to say. It's mysterious. But I can tell you, I've come down this long path so far. You've come where you are so far. And when you trust in God, He does a masterful work and will continue to do a masterful work. And we see that with David. You think of when he was just a boy anointed to become a king. He didn't immediately become a king. He remained a shepherd. He fought a giant. He went out to war. Now he's on the run. And throughout the rest of 1st and 2nd Samuel, he's got a mess of a life. But he's continuing to be built in just the right way when he returns to God and acknowledges that the right direction is to follow Him. 1 Samuel 20:24 says, "So David hid himself in the field, and the new moon festival began. The king sat down to eat. He sat at his usual place against the wall, with Jonathan sitting opposite him and Abner beside him." This king is fully protected. There's no assassins getting in here. He's in just the right spot. Even if David were to come in and get him, no chance. But David's place was empty. And Saul didn't say anything about it that day, for he said to himself, something must have made David ceremonially unclean. I don't think that's the reason why he wasn't there. I mean, you throw a spear at somebody, you're going to want to have dinner with them the next day? But when David's place was empty again, the next day, Saul asked Jonathan, "Why hasn't the son of Jesse been here for the meal either yesterday or today?" And here's the thing. Saul does not call David David anymore. They used to be best buds. They used to be. The text says that Saul loved David. I might think that he would even come up with nicknames for David. It might be like, "Oh, hey, Davy's here," or "Dave Areno, great, glad you're here. Play some music for me, bud." Now it's moved to a space where he's calling him the son of Jesse instead. And I think of how cruel this is, because it kind of remains at this point. He does not call David David. That'd be like if I were in trouble and I got into an argument with my wife for whatever reason. Say I made a $6,000 purchase. I joked about it this week, trying to see what my wife's reaction would be. Just thought it'd be funny. And, if she actually was super angry with that, or if I actually committed to that, and she started calling me, "Oh, you son of Liz Smith," be weird. Be strange. You call somebody by their name. Like, you get to the point where you have special names for somebody. You'll break down the names to the point where you'll shorten it or make it something cute. But if you retract all of that and say, you're the ownership of somebody else. Saul at this point is saying, you're not my son-in-law. You're not even David. You're your father's son. You're a son of nothing. You're Mr. Nobody. Where's this Mr. Nobody today? Jonathan replies, David earnestly asked me if I can go to Bethlehem. He says, please let me go, for we are having a family sacrifice. My brother demanded that I be there. So please let me get away to see my brothers, that I may, that's why he isn't here today at the king's table. Saul boiled with rage at Jonathan, you stupid son of a whore. It's actually even more cruel language than that. Swears at his own boy. Do you think I don't know that you want him to be king in your place, shaming yourself and your mother? As long as that son of Jesse is alive, you'll never be king. Now go and get him so I can kill him. It's a cruel point in Saul's life. He is very apparent about his intentions. Jonathan, as much as he's trying to protect, David complicates the lie even more by adding more details. And when you start to complicate a lie, when you try to add more details, it gets messier. Even if it's for the sake of the intention of keeping somebody alive. Simple is better. But Saul picks up, particularly in this phrase when it says, please let me get away, it's saying essentially, please let David flee. It's a slip of the tongue. But Saul picks up and, he says, you're a terrible son. You've disgraced your mother. He's using the tactic of shame, saying you're worthless because you think this way. He addresses with guilt. He's trying to win Jonathan back with guilt, saying, you're missing out on your opportunity as king. You've given up all of your opportunities, your privilege, your power, your position. And he's trying to entice Jonathan with greed, saying, remember the things that you were going to have. If this son of Jesse continues to live, you get nothing. You become worthless. You see, when we go our own way, as Saul has gone his own way, we again try to fight to keep the process. We try to fight to keep the same patterns we have had all of our life. If something threatens it, violence comes out, particularly as we see this next verse. Jonathan tries to defend. He says, but why should he be put to death? He said this line in the previous chapter trying to defend David. He says, what has he done? And Saul has none of it anymore. He has no convincing room left. Saul hurls a spear at his own son, intending to kill him. So at last, Jonathan realized, it took a while for him to realize, that his father was really determined to kill David. Jonathan left the table in fierce anger and refused to eat on the second day of the festival, for he was crushed by his father's shameful behavior towards David. Everything started with something private, and it became something super ugly. The disastrous effects of hidden sin, when we try to harbor it and say it's not so bad, I'll be fine, I'll get used to it, it's just part of who I am. It leaks out, it gets out and hurts the people around us if you're not addressing it. Saul never addressed it. He had all the wake-up calls. God was still offering him plenty of opportunities for repentance, but he hung on to his obsession with his own pride. And he allowed that to crush him, hurt his own family, and lead them down an even more dark path. What Jonathan is grieving is the shameful behavior that his father has towards David, but frankly, he is mourning the way that his father is, because he is now the enemy of David and also the enemy of the Lord. The next morning, as agreed, Jonathan went out into the field and took a young boy with him to gather his arrows. He says, "Start running, so you could find the arrows as I shoot them." So the boy ran, and Jonathan shot an arrow beyond him. When the boy had almost reached the arrow, Jonathan shouted, "The arrow is still ahead of you. Hurry, hurry, don't wait." So the boy quickly gathered up the arrows and ran back to his master. He, of course, suspected nothing. I think for just a moment, this is a little bit of comedic relief in a dark situation. Jonathan gets a young boy. He knows nothing and says, "Hey, come with me. I'm going to go shoot some arrows into an open field." Okay? Shoot some arrows. And, he's doing his duty. And he gets to the arrows. And his master is like, no, keep going. Just go. Okay? Young boy's like, what's going on? But this message is addressed to David. And this boy's like, I don't know. He's just shooting arrows. He suspects nothing. Only Jonathan and David understood the signal. Then Jonathan gave his bow and his arrows to the boy and told him to take them back to town. Jonathan disarms himself. As soon as the boy was gone, David came out from where he had been hiding near the stone pile. Then David bowed 3 times to Jonathan. With his face to the ground, both of them were in tears as they embraced. Some translations will say they kissed one another. I imagine this is acknowledging this is the last time they'll see one another. When your heart is breaking, affection is growing in the sense that you are trying to care for each other one last time. I don't imagine it's a lip kiss. I imagine it's one of those like European cheek kisses, whatever. Even a forehead kiss, whatever. It's just trying to point to this idea that this is the last time they will see each other. This is the last true conversation that they will have with each other. And the last words that they say as they honor each other, as they show this deep-hearted love for each other is this. Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for we have sworn loyalty to each other in the Lord's name. The Lord is witness of this bond between us and our children forever." Then David left and Jonathan returned home. Hesed is stressed constantly throughout this chapter of covenantal love, of loyal love, that they are before each other and before the Lord. And we fast forward down the generations of David's line when we get to Jesus' journey. Jesus didn't have a quick journey, quick fame, quick anything. He had 30 years of waiting and growth, 40 days of fasting and temptation after he was baptized. 3 years of ministry filled with struggle and pressures. 1 week of impending death, faced with a crowd that loved him at first and then called for his death a week later. He was mocked and beaten, and 6 hours on the cross of physically suffering and taking on all the punishment that was meant for our sins. Every thought and every word and every action was imbued into him. In 3 days, he was separated from the Father. That close-knit relationship was broken for a time. And then after that, he is forever risen from the dead and reigning as king, leaving sin and death in the grave. It's a fantastic journey. But it is one marked by the idea of Hesed. Jesus remained loyal to the Father, constantly praying to the Father and appealing to him for help. And then his Hesed for us, his loyal love to each one of you in this room, was paid for on the cross. And as he left that in the grave, when you trust in him, what you're invited into is the same kind of trust and the same kind of loyal love that Jesus had with the Father. He's offering his loyal love, and we in turn are called to loyally love God and those around us. That is what gives us true life and purpose, friends. This time, Ignite can come up. The big idea again is this: loyalty is the mark of lasting love. David and Jonathan model an example of loyalty, which both appeal to the Lord and it continues to guide them. Jonathan's loyalty is tested as he informs David of his potential demise and a transfer of power. David will be tested in the future to keep his covenantal promise. So the 3 points that we can get is this: loyalty and love are tested by consistency and perseverance. We can model their loyalty by following the example of Jesus' loyalty to the Father. And last, as a church community, we are called to display chesed to each other. This loyal love, this goodness, this kindness, this consistency, friends. When you are in a community of believers, we are building each other up, and we are going out into the watching world, setting that example as a light to the watching world. So my challenge to you this week, if you could find one person, whether you're at a restaurant, if you're at a store, wherever you are, find a way to encourage somebody and build them up. Amongst the members in church here, if you could find a way to reach out to them and bless them this week. This is a way to stress this kind of loyal love. This is what we're invited to practice as Jesus gives us this great commandment to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. This is all really good.